Well, hey, we are in week 2 of our series, One Life, Making the Most of It. And I've loved this series so far. And this is the deal, is that you and I, we only get one life on this earth. And none of us wants to look back at the end of it and discover that we had a full calendar and maybe a full bank account, but an empty life. That's not Jesus' intent when he said in John 10:10, our key verse, that he came so that we would have life and live it to the full. What he's talking about is this abundant life. See, Jesus didn't save you so that he could see you in heaven someday. He saved you so that you could have a little bit of heaven in your everyday. And what this is talking about is that this full abundant life, it's not a perfect life, but it's a life full of his spirit. His spirit that gives you strength when you're weak and it gives you direction when you're lost. This life that's full of life-giving relationships. And like Todd said last week when he preached that this life, it is possible and it is available, but it's not inevitable. See, if we want to make the most of this life, we might have to make a few changes. And so I'm excited to share the word with you today because this is a word that's been on my heart for a while. And I am really passionate about this. And it's gonna be a little bit personal. I'm gonna take a risk and be a little bit vulnerable today. And I'm gonna start out today by sharing something with you that I am not really proud of, something about myself that I'm not really proud of. And that is that I can be really clueless. And there are some people, some friends on the front row here that usually shout me down. They're really quiet right now because they don't want to say, amen, Julie's clueless. But I can be really clueless. Now I know that the truest thing about me is what God says about me. He says that I am called and chosen. He says that I am confident, that I can do all things through Christ. And this is who I am in Christ. But it is not who I am when I'm left up to my own devices, right? I have lots of stories, but I want to share one of them with you. I've had my car for about 8 years now, right? And you guys know if you've had your car for a while, over time, they start to develop these character flaws. And I call them character flaws because they usually show up after the warranty expires, right? And so my car, has a couple character flaws. Maybe yours does too. It's the window that no longer rolls down, right? And it's the cigarette lighter that doesn't charge your phone. I'm not sure if it ever did in the first place, but for me, my car started to develop this flaw a couple years back when this random light came on in my car, right? And so I'm driving down the road and this random light shows up in my car and it says to check my tire pressure. And so the first time it showed up, I am pulling over to the side of the road. As soon as I can, I get out, I check my tire, it looks okay. But then I go home and I'm like, Todd, check tire pressure. Can you check my tire pressure? He says, it's fine, but I'm not gonna take any chances. So I take it into the dealership and they take a look at it and they say, hey, listen, it's not your tire, it's your computer. It's a computer glitch. Well, that's a lot more expensive than a tire, right? But, I was like, yeah, please fix it. So over time, it was fixed, but then it shows up again. So the next time it shows up, I go check my tire and it's fine. And I decide to wait till the next time I need to send my car into the shop to get it fixed. And over time, this has happened several times. And I always do check my tire, but it's a little bit, okay, yeah. So over time, I get used to it. So a couple weeks ago, this light comes on again. And so I'm driving home from church one night and I live about 5 minutes away. And so the light comes on, I get out of the car when I get home, check the tire, it's fine as usual. And so the next morning I come back to the church early in the morning and I get up to my office and within about 3 minutes, I get this text with this photo. I think you probably saw this coming. Yes, this was my flat tire. I had a flat tire. I had been riding, I drove the entire way to church on a flat tire. I drive on I-95 every single day. This could have been catastrophic. I could have died, right? All because I was a little bit clueless. But here's what I want you to know, is that today in this room, there are many of us that we have a warning light going on the inside of us. And over time, we've just gotten kind of used to it. We kind of start ignoring it because it might be a little bit too costly, might be complicated to fix like my computer, or maybe you've tried to fix it many times and it just keeps coming back. And what you don't know is that you are actually driving around on a flat tire and you are headed for some danger. See, the signal that I'm talking about, the warning light that I'm talking about today is something so serious that the Surgeon General actually issued a warning. And they said this is the number one threat to an American's well-being, their emotional well-being, and their physical well-being. That this warning is actually more dangerous than diabetes, obesity, and smoking 15 cigarettes a day. What I'm talking about today is loneliness. Loneliness. Loneliness, by definition, is this. It's this ongoing psychological state when we lack the consistent, authentic relationships that we need to thrive. We need relationships to thrive, and loneliness has become this pandemic. And pan means that everyone's affected by it, right? And for the first time in history, every generation is more lonely than the generation before them. And in an anonymous survey, and I say anonymous for a reason, because in an anonymous survey, 2/3, 65% of people admitted that they were lonely, but only 12% will talk about it or do anything about it because there's such shame and embarrassment attached to it. And so I'm not gonna ask you today to raise your hands or stand up if you're lonely, but I am gonna ask for some participation, okay? So this is a participation moment for all of our campuses. I wanna ask you, if your birthday is between the months of January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August, I want you to stand to your feet. Stand to your feet, January through August, if that's when your birthday is. Okay, stand to your feet. Okay, so I want you to look around for a minute. This is how many people are at your work, on the golf course, at your school, and in your church that are lonely and headed for danger. And what I want you to hear is that if you're here today and you are lonely, you're not alone. You are not alone. You are not lonely because you are unworthy or unwanted. If you're a student, you're not lonely because you're uncool or unpopular. See, this warning, it is not, no, don't sit down yet. Warning is not, warning, I'm making a point here. Warning, your loneliness is not a weakness. It is a warning light. It is a warning light going off telling you that there is something wrong. But I've got good news, this problem can be solved. This problem can be fixed. You can have a seat. What you need to know. This is a fixable problem. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with me. This is not a you problem. It's an us problem. It's a we collective problem that we have. See, we all live in this society that actually elevates being self-made and independence. And yet this is not how people have lived in the generations before us. This society that we live in today, we've seen it kind of taking a turn over these last several years with digital social media coming on the scene, and we're the most digitally connected yet relationally disconnected generation in history. But we've seen it change gradually, but over the last few years, since 2020, and I don't think we're gonna see the impact and the effect that 2020 had on us for years to come, but we know some of it, that in the research that men are 5 times more lonely today than they were before 2020. That even though 65% of the general population are lonely, 78% of our young people are lonely. For the first time in history, they are more lonely than the sick and the elderly. It's also not like this everywhere else in the world. Like you look at Uganda and Indonesia, and they report much lower rates of loneliness, even though there's so much poverty. And that's because I know they're kind of forced into it because they're interdependent, on each other. But you even look at the Netherlands and Finland, and their young people, 13%, because they've designed their culture to value relationships. And see, our culture has made this shift over time, and it's getting less and less interdependent. I mean, think about it. We've actually traded our front porches, right, long nights on the front porch for long nights with Netflix marathons. We've traded carry-in dinners where we have long conversations for Uber Eats that will drop at your door. Did you know there's a button that they will just put it at your door? You don't have to talk to the person who delivers your food anymore. I mean, this is crazy. And I'm not knocking Uber Eats. Our family probably might starve without it. But I am saying that this is the deal, is that there's nothing wrong with privacy, but when as a culture we begin to prioritize some values over others, over time, it takes a toll. We all need privacy, but when we value privacy over intimacy and authenticity, when we value convenience and comfort over community, over time, it's leading us someplace. And the place that it's leading us is to isolation. And isolation isn't just a social problem. Isolation is a spiritual problem. You know, that verse, John 10:10, this life that Jesus came to give you, right before it says that we have an enemy that is out to steal it, to rob it, to kill it, to destroy it, because he knows that if he can get you alone, he can take you out. Isolation is the enemy's weapon to destroy your body and to destroy your relationships. And he knows if he can get you alone, he can not only take you out, because he knows that the only battle you can't win is the one that you try to fight on your own. And here's the deal, is I know that when I'm talking about this, some of you are saying, you know, that's me. Like, you know that warning light's going off. But some of you are sitting there thinking, you know, I'm not lonely. Like, I am around people all day long. I am a mom of kids. I can't even go to the bathroom by myself, right? And you're around people all day long. You're saying, I'm not lonely. But I did some research on some of the symptoms of loneliness. And here's what I found. That some of the symptoms of loneliness, see if any of these sound familiar. You don't have anyone to call to pick you up at the airport. You have something to celebrate or grieve, and you don't know who to call to celebrate and grieve with, and you feel just alone. You're looking at the weekend with no plans. You feel like a loser. You'd rather post your tough times on social media than risk someone coming over to have that deep conversation. You feel like you're always the one who initiates getting together, and you just can't handle another no, so you just don't bother. Or someone does initiate, they call you to make last-minute plans, but it's just easier to get cozy and binge on Netflix. Or maybe it's bigger, maybe you're the one that's helping everybody else find their relationships, but you're missing yours. What I want you to know is this isn't a random list. This was actually my list. A few years back, after just everything we went through in 2020, like, there was just this underlying sadness that I had gotten used to. And my perspective on a few things was just a little bit off, right? I was a little clueless. But here's the deal. This is not how you were created to live. This is not how I was created to live. Loneliness it wasn't the problem. It was actually the signal. And loneliness is this warning light that's going on, right? This is warning light that's going on inside of us to let us know that one of our deepest human needs is not being met, and that we're missing out on one of God's greatest gifts, the part of his inheritance that he wants us to experience. See, loneliness isn't what's wrong with you, it's what's right with you. It's not what's wrong with you, it's your signal's working. Your signal's working, and what's right with you is that you were created in the image of a relational God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, for a relationship. And so Jesus, actually, when he came to the earth, he modeled this for us. He modeled this. He lived every single day in community. He had this crowd that he lived with, that traveled with him, and there were a lot of people in that crowd. But then, in that crowd, there was also this community of 72 disciples. I know we talk about the 12 all the time, but there were actually 72 disciples. And these are the people that he did life with about every single day. But then from that community, there were 12 close friends. The 12, we know their names. And even in the 12, there were still 3 really close friends that got to do the cool stuff. Like, they got to go to the Mount of Transfiguration and see Elijah and Moses. And I bet you, like, other disciples were like, hey, can I go? He's like, no, taking these guys with me, Peter, James, and John. But they were also the guys that on the darkest night of his life, the night before he was crucified, that he asked those three to stay close, within earshot, just to pray with him. See, if the Son of God needed these kinds of relationships, it would be really arrogant of us to think that we don't. See, the call to discipleship, when Jesus said, come follow me, he was calling us into community. That's why it says in John 13:34, it says this is the kind of community he's talking about. So now I'm giving you a new commandment, that you love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you're my disciples. He's saying that this kind of love is what's gonna make your faith actually believable and contagious. And what he's saying here is that this kind of love, it can't be done at a distance. And this kind of love isn't just a feeling we have, it's actually this commitment that we make. The kind of love that Jesus is talking about here is this Galatians 6:2 kind of love. That when life is unbearable, the breakup that you didn't see coming, the heartbreak, the devastating doctor's report, that you would have people to help carry the weight. Because all of us are gonna go through things that are too heavy for us to carry, and it's God's plan that you wouldn't have to carry it alone. This is a 1 Thessalonians 5:11 kind of love, that when life knocks you down, that you have your people to encourage, to give you courage, to get back up, to remind you that God is for you, and there is greatness in you, and that you would be there to do the same for them. But it's also a Proverbs 27:17 kind of love, an iron sharpening iron kind of love. And being sharpened does not always feel so good, but you're gonna stick around for the hard conversations. You're gonna stick around to be held accountable for the commitments that you made, because you know that is what is going to grow you and make you more like Jesus. It's a Colossians 3:13 kind of love, that you have people in your life that are not surprised by your faults, and you're not surprised by theirs. And you're willing to fight for the relationship by forgiving. And I know you're probably sitting there saying, is this kind of community really even possible in 2024? I mean, are these kinds of relationships even possible? And I would say to you, yes, but not inevitable. See, is it possible? Like, do I have to build a front porch on my house or move to Uganda? No, but you might have to do something that may feel a little bit countercultural. You know, Todd shared a true story last week, and it was about 𝙉𝙭𝙭, and he lived in India. And you remember the story, if you were here, that he lived in India and he had everything he really needed. He wasn't rich, but he was content. He had everything he needed, beautiful family, a thriving farm. But a priest came one day and said that there are people that are getting wealthy in other parts of the world because they are finding diamonds in Africa. And so Ali ends up selling everything that he has, leaving his family behind, going to East Africa to mine for diamonds. And he didn't find any diamonds there, so he followed the crowd to Europe. And he didn't find any diamonds there, and finally, penniless and alone and devastated, he ends up taking his own life. Well, meanwhile, back at the ranch, the person that bought his farm actually was in a stream one day, and he actually came across this rock, and it was kind of sparkly. And so he brought it in his house, and he put it on a mantle, and the same priest came and made a visit to this guy. And he said, hey, that rock. And he said, yeah, I thought it was kind of pretty. He said, those are diamonds. See, on the same land that 𝙉𝙭𝙭 had sold were acres of diamonds. They actually became the Golconda diamond mines that are the most exclusive diamond mines on the planet. And he missed it in the same place, in the same field. And Todd asked this question. He said, what if the life you're trying to find is closer than you think? See, when it comes to the opportunity of this wealth and the richness of these relationships, if you are sitting here today, you are sitting on acres and acres of diamonds. See, in the same way that Jesus had people, you have people. You're sitting on potential wealth, and you might be missing it. Because if you only show up once a month, you might miss the diamonds. And that's not to judge you, it's just to say, I don't want you to miss out. If you come in after the first song and you leave during closing prayer, you might miss some diamonds. But there's so much available to you in community. And just like Jesus had a crowd, you have a crowd. There's this crowd that you have in your life. These are the people that you work with, that you go to school with, that you play golf with, that your kids play travel soccer together. And these are some people that you're doing your life with. You see them frequently during the week. And some of you may be blessed. You may say, I'm not lonely. I have found a few really good friends there. And I believe that it is possible to find some of those kinds of friends in the crowd. But some of you, you might have found a few friends, but you know that you might need a mentor or someone that's gonna help you grow in your faith, so your circle's not quite complete. But for most of us in this room, 65%, according to research, we have a crowd in our lives. Like, we have a really full calendar, but we are empty in relationships because we're trying to find those close friends out of the crowd. And many times we're stepping over the acres of diamonds that are available to us. And what I'm talking about is that this community, we go from the crowd to get close friends, and we skip over the community. And particularly is the faith community that I'm talking about. See, just like Afad left his diamonds, there are acres and acres of diamonds right under your feet called the church. And I just want you to look at this verse for a minute because I love it, because this is God's design. It says this, it says, Father to the fatherless, defender of widows, this is God, whose dwelling place is holy. God's places the lonely in families. He sets prisoners free. He gives them joy. His dwelling place is the place where his presence and his people are. And I am not saying that this is the only place that you can find these kinds of friendships. I'm just saying that there could be an incredible amount of wealth that you might be missing out on. And I know this, I'm passionate about this because this has been so true in my life. And you might be going, Julie, you're kind of like the Ugandans because you're a pastor, so you do life with a lot of pastors, and you've got an incredible family. And there are people, my family and pastors in this church are part of our close circle of friends. But I want to tell you about some diamonds in my life that are not pastors, and they're not part of my biological family, but they've had a profound impact. I want to tell you a little bit about David and Marla. And David and Marla, they were and they still are business people, business owners. And we met several years ago because we were in a group together. They were a part of our worship team, and we were like a legit group. We did Bible studies, we served together. And David was was a pianist here, one of the first pianists at our church. And we had bonded because we were both going through an infertility journey. And David and Marla, they adopted 2 beautiful girls. And this picture is the day that we brought Jefferson home from the hospital, right? And so they were there, and our friendship grew over time. And over time, they were actually they lived about an hour away, but they were actually the first people that I ever heard that what we tell you guys a lot, that you become the average of your 5 closest friends. Well, David and Marla took this really seriously, and they wanted to make sure that they had 5 people and they lived close and did life with them. So they actually moved. They decided to move to this area, and they decided for some reason they wanted us to be one of those 5. And so they decided that they were gonna buy the lot next door to us and build their house there. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, right? Not because of them, but because of me. I was a young pastor's wife. I felt like I already lived in a fishbowl. Like, what if they see my flaws and my faults? What if I let them down? Well, the plan went forward because I was too insecure to even talk about it. And so they said, hey, we're gonna build our garage so it's facing your garage. And so every single day when we come in or leave, we're gonna say hi to each other, and we're gonna be able to connect. I'm like, great. Well, listen, I am so glad that David and Marla did not prioritize privacy over community, because the white fence between our house over the last 25 years has been, there have been countless numbers of cups of sugar, flour, whatever else we forgot at the grocery store to complete the dessert that you had to share if we gave you the cup of sugar, right? It was also the place of 10-minute breaks at 10 o'clock at night when our kids were driving us crazy, and we could meet at the fence and have a moment of peace together. It was also where there were times that when we were prayed together, and for our kids, for God to do the miraculous, and we saw answered prayers. But then the times that we prayed so hard and didn't get the answer that we wanted, and for some reason it just made it more bearable knowing that somebody else was there with us and that they cared. And for some reason, our faith kind of grew stronger through it. When Marla, in her 20s, lost both of her brothers, tragically, in their early 30s, Todd became a brother to David and to Marla. And over time, yes, they did see some of my faults, but they haven't moved. So I think they still like me, and so this relationship has marked our life. But I've got other diamonds I want to share with you. And the next one is when you look at this picture, you might see a random wedding photo. This is back in 2020, the day Jefferson and Cassie got married. And I see diamonds, like a field of diamonds. And if you look at the bridesmaid right there, that's Lindsay. And Lindsay was volunteering in our children's ministry when she was in high school. And I was going through a really hard time with Jefferson at that time, just needed a little break. And she came to me and said, hey, can I come over and babysit for free? I'm like, absolutely. Well, over time, she became such a big part of our life. I did eventually start paying her. But she was a babysitter. That in college, she became a big sister to Jefferson. That was an answer to prayer because he was an only child. She became a little sister to me. But she had a front row seat of a lot of my parenting mistakes. Now she's a parent, and I hope that there's some mistakes that she doesn't have to make because she saw all of mine up close and personal. And next to her is Danny. If you're at our Jupiter campus, you know who Danny is. He's on the platform almost every week. He's our keyboard player there. And Danny, when he was in his early 20s, he started a music studio called 𝙎𝙎𝙭 Studios, and Jefferson was one of his first students. Was his Jefferson when he was 12, and he was in such a dark place, physically and emotionally. And Danny was teaching him how to play guitar, and this is before Jefferson had ever stepped on a platform to lead worship. And the words that Danny spoke over Jefferson's life in these moments have marked him, have changed it changed his future. He said, Jefferson, before he'd ever played on a platform, you are a worship leader. And Jefferson spent the next several years stepping into those words. And now he leads worship. And this is the deal. By the way, Danny was raised in our church. He's got 6 siblings, and his mom and dad were plugged in. And I didn't have to go Google someone to prophesy over my son's potential. He was in my field. He was in my field. And there's so many people in this picture, this wedding photo, that you've got Bill, who's been a pastor with us for several years, and his kids. And look, there's David and Marla. They were there on the day we brought them home from the hospital. They were there on the wedding day. They have been diamonds in my life. And I know this is my story, but it's so many other people's story. I think about Cole and Carissa. Cole and Carissa, they in their early 20s, they decided to start fostering. And they adopted Nyla, who is now 6 years old, and then they decided to take in another little girl, Michaela. And when they got Michaela right out of the NICU, and when they got Michaela, she was detoxing off of drugs, and so she just screamed for hours on end. And they have full-time jobs, and they have another child, and they were like, we just don't know if we can do this anymore. And so another person in their community stepped up, and they took Michaela for a week. And I don't know what happened at the end of that week, but when she came back, if she was different, or Cole and Carissa were different, but they knew that this was going to be their forever child. And because of that break, because of community, their whole family looks different today. Their whole family, their family's future was changed because of somebody that stepped up in community. They didn't have to Google anything. They were right there in their field. And you've probably heard us say before, to find your people, right? You've heard that saying, but what I want you to hear is that the relationships I'm talking about, they can't be just discovered. Diamonds aren't found. They're not just found, they're mined for. That you have to mine for them. And sometimes when you're mining for diamonds, they don't look like diamonds at first. This is what they look like. They look like this. And sometimes you have to dig through some dirt to find the diamonds. To get to the diamond in relationships, you're gonna have to dig through some dirt. And some of the dirt I'm talking about might be the dirt of disappointment or discomfort. And I remember a couple years back when I was telling you about the little season I was walking through, right in the middle of that season, we were gathered together with some of our friends, and we had one of those questions in our group that you have sometimes. It's like, what are your highs and your lows? And so I was getting ready to share something like really surfacey, okay? Because that's where I'd gotten. I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna stay on the surface here. And Todd, he just kicks the door open, right? And he gets all authentic and vulnerable. And he starts to tell the group, he's like, guys, it's been a lonely couple of years. And we really need you guys. And I was a little uncomfortable with that level of vulnerability. But let me just tell you, it opened the door, and everyone around the table started to share, yeah, we're going through some things with our adult kids that we just haven't been able to share. And somebody else said, I've been going through something physically, and I just didn't want to burden you guys. And I was like, I know, we all said, we know we're really busy, we really need each other. And the crazy thing is in that season, Todd and I we'd put out an invite, and when we get rejected, we're like, oh man, they don't want to be with us. Oh, here we go again. And we just kind of got tired of it. What we realized was that everyone in the room kind of felt the same way. They all felt like they were the ones making the first move. And here's what I learned in that conversation, is that if you're gonna have these kinds of relationships, you're gonna have to press past some disappointment and discomfort. You're gonna have to be the one to do the inviting. I mean, yes, you might get rejected. If someone rejects you, you just be sad for a minute and move on and invite somebody else or invite them again. Because you're never gonna have these kinds of relationships if you don't make the first move. And so there's a scripture in Proverbs that kind of says it this way: a man who has friends must himself be friendly. Friendly means more than just being nice. It means to get uncomfortable. It means to take a risk. And is it risky? Yes. Will you get hurt? Yes. I just shared with you all of the good points, I wish our friendship was just built on weddings and births, but great relationships are built under heat and pressure. That's where diamonds come out, is under the heat and under the pressure. And it takes some time, right? You're gonna get hurt. Will somebody let me down? Yes. And you might let them down. But here's the deal, I get it, because I know some of you have been hurt before. And you've been hurt by Christians before, people that should have done better and been better. And I am so sorry if that happened to you. You shared a vulnerability and someone used it against you. You shared a confidence and somebody repeated it and weaponized it. It's happened to me too. And when that happens, you start to build up walls. And these walls, they keep the hurt and the disappointment out. But the same walls that keep out the bad stuff, they're keeping out the good stuff. They're keeping out the joy of celebration, multiplied joy. They're keeping out the freedom that comes in confession. They're keeping out wisdom that you don't have. It's keeping out all the good stuff. And we don't want you to miss out on any of the good stuff. We want you to experience this full life that Jesus came to give you. It's available, it's possible, but it doesn't just happen. It means that we're gonna have to dig through some dirt. And so my challenge today for all of us is that each one of us, that we would start mining. We start mining for the diamonds, that we would start digging to make the effort. And I'm just gonna get really bold. I am asking everybody that calls Christ Fellowship their home to start digging. And this is what I mean. At all of our campuses today, because like I said, remember I told you that one of the reasons I didn't fix my light was because it was just a little bit too complicated. It was a computer issue. Well, we don't want this to be complicated for you. We've tried to just make it easy. And so this weekend, it's Connect Weekend. And so this is more than a sermon series. My prayer is that this will be the beginning of you mining for some diamonds. And so at all of our campus locations, we got people out there to talk to you, to have the conversation, but I'm asking everyone to do one of three things. I'm asking you to join a group, start a group, or lead a group. If you've never joined a group before here, a small group, I'm asking you to step out, take the risk, right? And you might be asking, will these be my closest, most intimate friends I have to share my deep, dark secrets with? And I'm like, probably not, but maybe, you'll never know unless you try. Because for me, every one of my inner circle today were at one point part of an organized group that I was in, or Bible study. And we have so many groups, Bible study groups and pickleball groups and soccer groups and just all kinds of groups for you to step in. And some of you might be saying, well, I tried a group before. And these were not my people. Do you think that in 30 years, I've never been in a weird group? Like, I have been in some weird groups, right? But you have a choice to make. You can either, right? You can either join another group, or you can start a group of your own. You've already got some people that you might be serving with or you're in a relationship with, and you can take it to another level. But you can take the risk. And for some of you in this room, the 1/3 that your warning light is not going off right now. Did you look around and see how many other people's warning lights were going off? Did you look around and see how many people don't have the relationships that you have? You're fine. You've got these relationships. You're growing in your faith. Well, how about you help somebody else find their people? How about you help somebody else dig for their diamonds? See, there are people in this room that need what you have. And so maybe it's leading a table at our parenting class because you've already raised your kids. Or maybe it's leading a group that are just starting out in their faith. Maybe it's starting a group that just meets once a month just to encourage each other. Whatever it is, I'm just asking everyone to take a step because it's time for all of us to mine for the diamonds, to start digging. So I want to pray for you. Would you just bow your heads? God, I thank you for the truth of your word, that your word brings life and life to the full. And your word tells us that we were created for this kind of community. And so God, I pray today, I pray that those that their light is going off, that they would take the step, and those that are not, that they would help somebody else take theirs. God, we know that your word says that it is so good and pleasant for us to be in relationship, and it's there that you are commanding a blessing. So I command a blessing on your people today. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. And all God's people said,